Hi, welcome back to Layton's Hollow. Today I thought I'd show you guys how I actually heat my greenhouse in the winter here in Canada. Last night it was around minus 10 here. Pretty cold night, that's minus 10 Celsius. My greenhouse, I had the fire in all night. I came down this morning at around 7 o'clock. There was still wood in the fire, and my greenhouse cooled down to about 15 degrees. And the sun has come up now, and I threw in like one chunk of wood in there at 7 this morning. And right now it's about 22 Celsius in the greenhouse. So it's kind of a little bit too warm. So I've actually opened up one of the windows to let some cool air in, because I only have cold crops planted, and they like it a little bit cooler than that. So yeah, let's get in. Okay, so when I first built my greenhouse, I actually dug it down into, I guess you would call like on a little bit of a bank. The ground kind of sloped up a bit. So what I did is I started at where my door is, and I dug it level. So on the far end of my greenhouse up there, I have about 3.5 feet underground on that end. On the back side, at that end is about 4 feet, and along here it's about 3.5 feet. But then on the back side of my greenhouse, I started composting, stuff that I don't really use much of, like old hay, old straw. I'm not really using it as a compost. This is just stuff that I don't need, like old boards, branches, and things like that. I kind of pack it all up behind the back side of my greenhouse so that it kind of compacts, comes down, and it works as an insulation. Like, I'm never planning on using that compost. I have my own compost piles going that I use for my gardens. So that's how I actually help preserve the heat. Now, how I actually generate heat is that this 45-gallon drum, I have 4 of these in my greenhouse. I have one on that end, one over there, one here, and one over there. They're full of water. Now, they don't really give off a lot of heat, but they do help keep the frost at bay. It kind of stabilizes the temperature. Say if the fire actually did go out at night, it would actually help keep the greenhouse above freezing. That's about why I keep those in here. Plus, I always have a few of these going around. These are just Javex bottles. This is what I use. I keep them around my fire. I let them heat up, and if it's going to be like a really, really cold night, what I will do with them is I will put them in between the walkways of my raised beds, just to keep the gardens that little bit warmer. Doesn't do a lot, like I say, but every little thing helps. Especially when it's minus 30 outside. Yeah, minus 30 Celsius is pretty cold, and especially if we're getting wind. The other thing I do in the far corner, I do my compost pile over there, which is going to be, I have a little bit of compost in there now. I don't really start it until around February is when I start really getting into composting. What it is going to be my hot compost that I sell in the spring of the year. And if I start it too early, what happens is it gets cooked too quick. So what I'll do is I'll wait till February, and then I will start that over in the corner. It usually does about 4 or 5 yards of compost up there. It goes down in the ground quite a bit. When I actually designed my greenhouse, I designed that corner specifically for doing hot compost. So I actually dug it down another 2 feet deeper into the ground than the floor of the greenhouse. So that actually gives off a lot of heat. It also gives off a little bit of carbon from the microorganism breaking down the compost, so it gets really hot. It actually helps the plants grow. Some of the other things that I do, well, my poly on my greenhouse is 3 layers thick. My ceiling right here, there's about a 2-foot space in between 2 layers above that. This side, out here, there's only 2 layers because on the south side is where I get most of the sun. So on the south, I only have 2 layers because it lets more light in and it lets more heat pass through the poly. That's why I only put 2 layers out there. I usually keep like all my pots, anything that's usually black or anything like that, all my pots and stuff, I keep it up on the walls. It absorbs a little bit of heat. Now when you're trying to grow things in your greenhouse, it's important, every little thing that you can do to actually help keep your greenhouse from freezing is a good idea. Like if you don't have 45-gallon drums, use a 5-gallon bucket of water. Like my buckets, or my barrels I should say, are not spray painted black. The reason I don't bother spray painting them black is because here in Canada in the winter time, we don't really get a lot of sunny days. We get some, but it's usually only for 2 or 3 hours, and if you only got 2 or 3 hours of sunlight a day, that little bit of heat that's coming from the sun this time of year will not eat a bottle or a 45-gallon drum of water. Now those are all the little things that I do. There's also other stuff that I actually do. I'm going to show you guys here on my camera. I'm not quite sure how well you guys will be able to see this, but I'm going to try and see if I can zoom in. Like if you look at my beds, see, if you look at my beds, there's no soil on the back part of this raised bed. What I actually do, because this is going to be the coldest part of my greenhouse is out here. This is where there's only 2 layers of poly. And it's the lowest part that's not really underground. It's only underground here about 2 feet or so. That's it. So when it's really, really cold outside, sometimes the frost can come through this wall out here, and it'll actually start to freeze this ground in here. So what I've found over the years is if I dig the soil out along the back of my raised beds, there, and over there, what it does is it stops the frost from getting into where my plants are. That works because I have heat in my greenhouse. So that's one trick that I do to help keep my plants from freezing. And if it's going to get, like if we get a really, say like in mid-January, February, and March, we get starting to get like really, really cold snaps, minus 30 for a week or so. What I will actually do is, I don't usually do this unless I have to. I will come down and I will put about 6 or 8 inches of straw around all of my greens and whatever I have growing at the time, just to give it that little bit more insulation in the ground, because the ground actually stays fairly warm because it's a dark soil, and the little bit of sun that we do get will actually warm the soil up a little bit. So those are some of the things that I do to help keep my greenhouse functioning in the winter. So now, the most important part is this thing right here, which is my wood stove. Now this is the wood stove I use. This thing is an old wood furnace, a forced air furnace stove, which I took all the outside parts off because there was never going to be any forced air in the greenhouse. The reason I like this one is because it has a huge firebox, so I can actually put, some fairly big chunks of wood in there. It's 36 inches deep, 2 feet wide, 2 feet high. That's the burn box itself. So yeah, I can put a lot of wood in there at night. This time of year, because it's only going down to minus 10, minus 7, minus 6. This has been a very unusual year this year. But yeah, if I fill it up at night with some dry wood and a little bit of not so dry wood, then it will burn for 12 to 14 hours, no problem. But now that's if I shut the damper off so it's not getting any oxygen in through the front, and I turn off the flue so that the air don't just go straight up the chimney, which I keep shut off most of the time. As you can see, when it comes to the wood stove, I have a pile of rocks that's piled about 2 feet deep on the back side, and it comes up to about 4 feet high. That's so that if the stove cools down, these rocks will stay warm for most of the night. They will be cooled down by morning when I come down here if the fire goes out. But they won't be ice cold, but they'll be cool. And like I said before, water is the best. The water absorbs more heat and it releases it much slower. So yeah, these are all the things that I do. As you can see, I keep my firewood in here to try to keep it somewhat dry. So yeah, I've been doing this now for 15 years in this greenhouse. Well, actually, no. I was here a few years before I actually got my greenhouse up. So yeah, it's been about 12 years, I should say. I've been doing this greenhouse. Maybe a little bit less. I don't know. I didn't really pay much attention to the year I made it, so I didn't care. For me, it's about growing food. Like a lot of people think that you got to go out and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on a greenhouse. Now, if you have the money to do that, all the power to you. I don't begrudge you whatsoever. Good for you. But what I'm going to say is that if you don't have a lot of money, there's always ways to build a greenhouse that don't really cost a lot. Like this big greenhouse that I have, it's not huge. It's 32 feet long, 14 feet or 16 feet wide. You know how much it cost me over the years? When I first put it up, it cost me $40. That's how much it actually cost me. $40. And that was to buy the poly and to buy the strapping that I needed to put the poly down. The rest of it all came from a friend of mine at a tarp burn that blew down, and a lot of the piping and stuff got bent, and he asked me if I wanted the piping, and I said, sure, I'm sure I can figure something out to do with it. So I took the piping home, and I decided, well, I'm going to build a greenhouse out of it. So yeah, so it's been up a while. I always grow all my food in here in the winter time, like mostly just greens and stuff like that. It's not like we can grow hot crops here in Canada in the winter time. But yeah, I do a lot of preserving, so like all of my tomatoes, peppers, squash, all that stuff is actually in my cold room in my house. And well, not my tomatoes and peppers and stuff, they all actually get processed. They get canned and preserved for the winter. So yeah, that's pretty much how I heat my greenhouse. Like I said before, that we don't really get a lot of sunshine here in the wintertime, and our daylight is from 8 a.m. till about 4:30 p.m. So I do use artificial light. I do have grow lights. I'll show you a couple of them. So yeah, these are my grow lights that I have growing here with my lettuce. It's just that we don't get enough daylight. And I also run some pretty high powerful LED lights. I'm not sure if you can see them now because the sunlight is actually, we do have a little bit of sun today. It is actually behind clouds, but it's almost like, I don't know, a mist cloud type thing. So yeah, here's some more grow lights over my greens that I have growing in my greenhouse. So yeah, that's another thing that you gotta kind of consider if you're planning on having your greenhouse run all winter, is having a way to give it a little extra more light. I will actually come down. I'm going to be adding another 6 to 8 inches of straw on the floor, because as long as I can keep the frost out of the floor, my greenhouse will stay warm. So if you got anything out of the video, maybe consider subscribing. Hit that bell notifications so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. And smash that like button. And thanks for watching.